you've missed out on all the benefits associated with opportunity zones. Next slide. So where we are with the implementation and where EIG really sees its role is EIG, Economic Innovation Group, as the original author of a concept paper that introduced opportunity zones, and now really serving as what I would say effectively is a nerve hub for information. So understanding how the market is moving forward, we really are focused on the effective implementation, alignment, and transparency of opportunity zones throughout the nation. So effective implementation meaning that we actually get rules from IRS and Treasury on how opportunity zones and the tax benefit will work. Alignment meaning that we're helping to inform states and local governments about how they should be thinking about additional incentives, regulatory relief, and aligning other programs to maximize the benefit of opportunity zone tax incentives. And then transparency, continuing to talk about the importance of ensuring that we are monitoring the activity and making that information publicly available as is appropriately deemed by Treasury and the IRS. So right now, opportunity funds self-certified. There's no mandate for any sort of reporting on what activities are happening in the market, but we continue to advocate for transparency and serving as sort of a centralized nerve hub. We also see our role as helping to inform the market about what activity is happening. Really quickly, I just want to share, I should have stopped there, but I'm going to share a little bit more. So the second round of proposed regulations, I just want to flag, comment period is coming to an end. There'll be a hearing on July 9th. We anticipate a third round of what I would say are FAQs around anti-abuse and reporting. There's some resources there if you want to learn more information about what other activities are happening at the federal level, so including the White House Opportunity Revitalization Council, which has already taken over 100 actions to align existing programs and grants and directing those to distressed communities and opportunity zones. There's been new legislation introduced by the original co-sponsors, so Senators Booker and Scott, to reinstate reporting requirements. And we continue to hear buzz around additional legislative fixes that could happen towards the end of this year and early next year. And just to give everyone a sense of what we're seeing and what the nation is seeing from a market formation standpoint, today there are over 130 opportunity funds that have raised their hand and said, we want to be known publicly that we are an opportunity fund, and collectively in aggregate, those funds are trying to raise over $29 billion in opportunity zone equity. Some resources there for you. I also just want to share that the raise range goes anywhere right now from $800,000 to $3 billion, just to show you how the broad spectrum of the amount of capital people are trying to raise within a fund. There's specialized funds that are forming. States are creating their own investor exchanges, so platforms to share investment opportunities. And cities are creating opportunity zone prospectus documents. So these are documents that highlight all of the reasons why investors should contemplate investing in those cities and also highlight some investable assets. And this is a slide that I want to share. We keep internally a map of select policies and initiatives and impact investments that are being made throughout the nation. And obviously I'm not going to go into all of these, but I do want to just demonstrate that there is a lot of activity that's happening. And this is just a small portion of it. It's a small portion of what we know, but it's also a small portion of just the market in general, because there are a lot of actors. There's over 8,000 census tracts, so 8,761 or other way around. There's a lot. There's a lot of activity happening. And I showed this to demonstrate that level of activity and encourage folks to be thinking about their opportunity zone framework, their policies, and how they're trying to approach investors to create their own opportunity funds. I believe I do want to also say that how we're gaining some of these insights is through our Opportunity Zones Coalition, which is a coalition of 80 plus stakeholders throughout the nation that are trying to make this work for their communities and their business models. And so if you're interested in learning more about that, please contact us at info@eig.org.
And we're also excited to see the Fund for Our Economic Future up there as Northeast Ohio. And I think we have several people here that are a part of the fund and participate in that group.
That's great.
All right, so next up, we have Jon Bonanno. He's the CXO, which I had to Google, is the Chief Experience Officer, I believe, for New Energy Nexus. So as I mentioned earlier, John's got a really cool vehicle to be able to, as he explained it last night, make a ton of impact by creating a lot of funds for a lot of folks that are looking to change the world. So, Jon?
Well, thanks, Rick, for having me. And thank you to both of the Rachels for their good work. We work with EIG a lot and think highly of Jon and Steve and Chris and all the staff. And thank you, Rachel, for your words about the local opportunities in the Ohio area. First, starting with this boring stuff, which is I'm neither a lawyer nor accountant. We'll go on to the next slide. So we have some supporting partners, and unfortunately the formatting on this slide is a little cockamamie, but not a big deal. We are, again, not lawyers nor accountants, and so we rely a lot on our partners, and DLA Piper, which is a top 5 law firm in the United States and very experienced in energy, is one of our partners. And then we work with structured finance people in clean energy, and also Cody Evans, who is representing a major family office. And Rachel, thank you for that nomenclature. Cody is referred to in our Opportunity Zone world as an OZOG, because he's one of the folks that has been working with John Lettieri and Steve Glickman and Sean Parker and others since like the instigation of this whole thing in 17 and 16. So good for that. Next slide. So Rick, I don't know if you can run that video, which is pretty self-explanatory. If you just click the video button there and then turn up your audio.
See what happens. Oh, it's over here.
Welcome to myozfund.org, a project of the New Energy Nexus and California Clean Energy Fund, a 16-year-old 501c3 not-for-profit supporting diverse clean energy entrepreneurs solving the climate crisis. Here at myozfund.org, our stakeholders are capital gains investors, developers of clean energy projects such as solar projects, energy storage installations, solar and energy storage systems, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, electric vehicle fleet leasing, wind farms, and wastewater, and communities looking to bring clean energy projects and opportunity zone capital to the areas. myozfund.org has 3 functions. First, there's awareness to inform all stakeholders that Opportunity Zone Finance is qualified for clean energy project and company investment. Then there's education. With the best possible educational content, we teach all stakeholders the mechanics of the Opportunity Zone tax incentive and how to apply and benefit from it. And finally, there's facilitation. On behalf of the capital gains investor or clean energy developer, we create compliant qualified Opportunity Zone Fund, QOF structures, file with the U.S. Treasury, refer a commercial bank account, and prepare 2 standard contracts, one for the investor and the QOF, and a second for the QOF and the equity offering entity. Get started now by using the mapping tool below to confirm your site is an Opportunity Zone. If the site is, then request our service in forming a QOF for you. Click Get Started anywhere on the site to begin benefiting from Opportunity Zone Finance and clean energy.
All right. So some of the things that I want to reiterate there are that we are a non-for-profit organization, so we don't have a dog in the hunt. We don't compete with capital. We don't compete with the developer. We don't compete with the CEO, and we don't compete with the community. We literally are in it to accelerate the transition to a non-fossil environment. Let's go to the next slide.
Maybe. There we go.
There you go. Okay, so further to what Rachel Reilly was talking about just a moment ago, opportunity zones were instigated under the Obama White House at the bequest of a gentleman named Sean Parker, who you may know as the former president of Facebook and now a multi-billionaire doing a lot of good works. He was the instigator of this legislation. He founded EIG. Then he hired both John and Steve, and they carried the ball over the line into the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, which became law in December of 2017. There are opportunity zones all over the United States and the American protectorates. There are over 8,700 of them throughout the United States, and all of Puerto Rico is an opportunity zone. And as you heard from Rachel earlier, there are lots of opportunity zones right in your town. And so you just have to go to myozfund.org, put in an address, and find out if your property is in the opportunity zone. And by the way, Rachel, I want to talk to you about that former steel mill that you're closing down, because I'm sure they have a good interconnect there. And renewable energy opportunity developers would probably like to optimize that interconnection. So please be in touch with me about that. Next slide. So as Rachel Reilly described, this is a relatively simple transaction in which capital gains investors in a timely manner take their capital gains and they put them through what's called a Qualified Opportunity Zone Fund. The Qualified Opportunity Zone Fund is a requirement for the transaction to be legitimate, and it really is the bottleneck in transactions. We believe in a decentralized, stakeholder-owned fund structure. So we don't believe in pooled capital where a professional manager is making fees. We believe that the either capital gains investor or the equity offerer should be the administrator of each fund, and each fund should only represent what's required for the investment, and you shouldn't pool capital at the fund level. Now, this is a different strategy than others are advocating. We just believe that because of the biannual compliance requirements of the fund, it is far more simple and far lower cost to administrate that compliance and to be in compliance by doing it in a 1-1-1 strategy, where it's one capital source, it's one QOF, and it's one equity investment. Now, if the investment requires more money than that capital source requires, then another QOF can be added for a second, third, fourth, fifth capital source, but each capital source will have their own unique and exclusive QOF through which they can take their activity. Next slide. So this is probably an eye chart for most people. I think we can take away here, this is modeling a 1 megawatt solar ground mounted in Delaware, which we worked with the developer and the capital source on. This is a transaction that's been completed where the NPV value of the property was increased by 17% by replacing 100% of the sponsor position with opportunity zone dollars. In the world of solar generation, where the asset is actually decreasing in market value over time, the major benefits are the basis adjustment of 15%. So despite what Rachel Reilly said, that there's no urgency, I would disagree with that entirely when it comes to clean generation assets, such as wind, solar, hydro, biomass, etc. Because those types of assets, from the moment you turnkey COD those projects, they almost immediately begin to lose their value. So if you invest your $1 million on year 1, by year 7 or by year 10, the value of that property is below $1 million. So unlike the story that is potentially true for real estate, where you invest your $1 million in a commercial real estate building and potentially it could be worth $2 million at some future time, where that tax avoidance on that exit is beneficial, well, that doesn't happen with green generation. So forward the slide 1 second. Yep. So under the right circumstances, there is obviously economic benefit here. And go ahead and slide again. And if it's structured correctly, the opportunity zone money can be used in combination with the investor tax credit, which can further increase your results. So to understand that more clearly, I'm happy to get into that. The investor tax credit is for income tax efficiency, and opportunity zone tax credit is for capital gains efficiency. But in a solar array, they can be used in combination, and that makes the outcomes particularly rich, which you should definitely consider. So go ahead. All right, so everyone has a role here. So what are the benefits for a clean energy developer? Well, it puts more money in your pocket potentially. So that means that a clean energy developer is going to look more carefully to prospect and sell into these low income areas in the United States, which frankly have huge benefits from clean energy projects and businesses. Next slide. So the checklist for the developer is pretty clear. Go to the opportunity zone, make sure your project by address is physically in the opportunity zone. Halfway down or 3/4 down the page, you'll see there's a map, and you can just click on that and then find out if your property's in or out. And then we are happy to help you, either the capital source or the developer, in setting up a compliant fund structure for that particular investment opportunity. But you have to have the one truth, and I've heard many people say this, the one truth about all of this is that if the underlying property or business does not merit investment, then the opportunity zone finance tax incentive helps nothing. It makes a good project better, but it doesn't make a bad project good. Go ahead. Okay, so the capital source also has a role. They need to staff up to be prepared to diligence these properties, whether it's a project or whether it's a corporation. They really should be choosing key developers to establish a serial relationship, because frankly, it's way too hard to do these as a one-off, and it doesn't really make sense to do it as a one-off. So looking to team up with qualified and trustworthy counterparties in the development space is a good idea. You should prepare your QOFs. So for whatever investment you're about to make, you should consider working with us on helping form those QOFs. I already spoke about the maximization of your outcome by the end of this year. Get your capital gains deployed before the end of this year. Using the 1-1-1 strategy is very, very important. And combining the ITC and OZ really does improve your returns. Go ahead. So the benefits are obvious. It increases the financial value of your investments, and you should really be looking at these as a capital source. Next. All right, so the Rachel that is working locally there in Ohio, that was really great. I'm glad to see that you've created a prospectus of your opportunity zones. That's really good. I don't know the tax rules at the state level of Ohio and if they automatically conform to the federal government, but you should certainly, if Ohio does not conform with federal tax, you should absolutely advocate for conformity with Ohio state tax so that the residents of Ohio can experience the full benefits of opportunity zones. I also think that government and bodies of government play a role in interconnect priorities and penalties for delays, because frankly, I've been doing clean energy long enough to see some extraordinary delays by the incumbent grid operators to avoid interconnecting clean energy projects, and it's just not fair. And so if the incumbent is delaying, well, then they should be punished, in my mind. I think that permitting should be streamlined, and it's very possible to do so. For these clean energy projects and companies, I think that there should be financial bonuses for training or hiring new people in these low income areas to develop skills in solar installation, wind installation, solar maintenance, wind maintenance, energy storage installation. These are the jobs of the next 50 years. So as the intent of the law is to rebuild the fabric of the United States by focusing capital on economic opportunity in these developing low income areas, well, we need to train and employ these people. I think they should receive a financial benefit from the state or the county or the city. You hire these people, we pay you $2,500 in cash. Okay, that's fair. I believe that they need to map out, which is really great, what Rachel has done. I would look at, if you're an investor or if you're a developer, I would work with her to find locations. As I said before, that former steel mill almost certainly has a very, very big electrical interconnect at that location, and you should consider monetizing that by working with her. I think that you should identify assets with the maximum social benefit, like EV charging infrastructure for fleet charging. I think you should consider things like concessionary leases. So lots to do on the state, county, and city level. Next slide. Why the heck would you want to make all those concessions? Well, number one, it's a great job creating vehicle. The number one creator of jobs in the energy sector is solar. So why not try and have lots of solar in the low income areas and train these people in these areas the skills of the next 3 decades? I think by doing solar or wind or hydro energy in these areas, you create energy resilience in a world that is getting more and more tumultuous from an environmental perspective. The lowest cost energy is available through these clean energy means. There's no risk of gentrification by clean energy assets. So there's a big pushback on real estate people using opportunity zones because people fear that the luxury hotel that's being built there is going to push out the local people. Well, you also have a clean air benefit, clean water benefit, no visual impact. There's just a plethora of huge benefits from supporting clean energy in opportunity zones for the state, the county, and the city. Go forward. So that's all I had for now, and thank you for being in the room or being on the webinar and taking this seriously. Clean energy is super important and fits well with opportunity zones.
One thing on the state taxes, if I'm correct, the state of Ohio actually did a matching, so it's the same as the federal, so they passed that, I think, last month. So there is actually a state opportunity zone incentive now as well for state taxes.
That's awesome.
Yep.
That's good news.
So it looks like you guys have a ton of questions. So let's start.
Is there any restrictions on investors also being officers or employees of any of the projects?
John or Rachel, can you hear that?
Why don't you repeat the question?
Yeah, I can do that. So are there any restrictions on investors being officers or employees of the company or equity project that is invested in?
I can share a little bit, and then John, if you have more. There is a 20% related party transaction rule that basically says if you are selling an asset that you are then investing in, you can only be 20% holder in it. So there are restrictions, especially around land. So if you're a current landowner, if you sell it to another party, you can only hold 20% of continued interest, up to 20%. So apply that to businesses, and it's basically the same, and that's part of the statute. John, I don't know if you have anything to add. No,
that's spot on, Rachel. I would only add that, so in the clean energy world, solar developers, wind developers have usually a remaining interest in a former project that they may want to liquidate, and they're trying to develop a new project. And so what we're seeing is developers are liquidating former positions and then pulling that capital gain into a new project. And so they're avoiding the arm's length transaction rules because they're totally unrelated transactions, but that it's the same party, but they're simply moving their capital into the front of their pipeline and accelerating their success. So Rachel is spot on with the real estate side. Clean energy, we haven't been faced with that yet. That sort of insider, you already own the asset and you're trying to upcycle it or recycle it. We don't see that in clean energy yet.
Okay, so follow up on that. Mm-hmm. So if I understood you correctly, an investor who's not selling something into this but just investing in it could then be an employee or an officer without any restrictions on the percentage of ownership. It's only if you were selling something that was receiving funds.
Did you hear that? I will do my best to repeat that.
They're 20% referred to, I believe, selling something.
Yes, your 20% refers to selling something, not to, say, an investor investing in his own company. So taking assets and making that equity investment into his own company.
Yeah, so where I would refer you is Novogradac. They're a tax accounting firm that has done and been on the forefront of all of this. I don't want to give any sort of tax accounting advice, but I always refer to the related party transaction. I understand what you're saying as far as disposition of the asset versus then investing in the asset. I would go to novogradac.com and see the information that they've provided through the first and second round of proposed rules to look into that a little bit further. It may need additional accounting advice and legal advice, but it also may be covered at Novogradac's blog post, which is novoco.com. So novoco.com.
Good.
I had a quick question for Jon. I just wanted to get a little more background. If you could give us what New Energy Nexus is, what they do. Are they looking to deploy capital? If so, is it their own, and what scale projects they're looking at?
Jon, what's New Energy Nexus, and do you deploy capital, and what scale of projects does New Energy Nexus look at?
Okay, that's a good question. New Energy Nexus is a 16-year-old 501c3 nonprofit, and we support diverse entrepreneurs to drive innovation and build equity in the clean economy. So we do not pool funds, because if we were to pool funds, we'd be on the other side of the transaction with our entrepreneur customer. So we are not pooling funds. We support. If you'll go to iozfund.org, you'll recognize that think of it as legal Zoom for QOF formation. And the idea here is we believe that an investment bank or a fund manager is not required. And that the list of, and it's very, very good tracking. And for some investors, it's the right decision to go with a pooled fund type of investment, like Rachel Reilly was showing the list of over 130 funds before. For some investors, that's the right decision. We feel that stakeholder-owned funds are most optimal because they deliver the most value to all the stakeholders. And no one's taking fees in that case. So we're not pooling funds, but that said, we're kind of the lone voice in the clean energy sector here around this opportunity zone tax incentive. And so we have a lot of investors coming to us saying, hey, can you help us find projects? And we have a lot of project folks coming to us and saying, can you help us find capital? And so we're not a broker dealer. We're not FINRA regulated. We're not SEC compliant, but yet we make these informal relationships and we let those people go off and do their diligence and have their time. And then when they're ready to transact, they come back to us and say, hey, we need 3, 4, 5 QOFs because we have 5 different capital sources and we're going to fund this project or we're going to fund this business. And off we go. We support them in that way. Does that answer the question?
So are you guys looking at a certain size or a segment that you're going to add more value to, as opposed to someone who, let's be honest, every investor is chasing clean energy projects right now. And I don't know if you are unique in the space. So I'm wondering what that is. And you mentioned entrepreneur customers. I just want to know what the connection is between you guys and the money. Did you hear that?
I will attempt to repeat. So what is the connection between New Energy Nexus and the money? You guys ask great questions that are long.
So New Energy Nexus has a portfolio of 48 companies. We are an active granting body. So we run a competitive process called CalSeed, where we grant non-dilutive capital to clean energy entrepreneurs. So we have our existing portfolio of 48 companies. By the end of this year, we'll have 75 companies. So we have funds that we deploy in grants, and so yes, we have a portfolio of our own companies, and they are doing Series A, Series B, Series Seed, and we're supporting them on QOF structures for those because we're encouraging those companies to move into if they're not already in an opportunity zone.
Moderately helpful. Do you only operate in California other than the POF project?
No, we operate nationwide. In fact, we're opening a clean energy incubator in New York over the next 24 months. We possibly will be opening an incubator in Puerto Rico over the next 24 months as well. So no, we're nationwide. In fact, we're global. We have an office in Jakarta, in Bangkok, in Singapore, and in Shanghai as well. But our headquarters is in California. And a lot of this work was born in California because that's where most of the clean tech revolution has happened so far, and now we're seeing a proliferation across the United States.
More questions? Sir?
For the technology companies, is there a concern about the resolving the ambiguity around the 5% working capital, the 70% assets staying in the opportunity zone, and the 50% revenue rule?
Here's what we're going to do, because I can't remember everything that everybody's saying. I'm kind of moving a microphone closer to people. Super dangerous. That should be close enough.
I can just answer the 50% revenue rule, which there were in the second round of regulations, 3 safe harbors provided, which are meant to, as Treasury would describe, ensure that companies have their heart of the operations within opportunity zones, but are open to business globally. So again, I would take a look at what the second round of regulations said around those 3 safe harbors. Novogradic's website does a really great job of describing those, but we did see some proposed relief around what was originally stated as needing to be 50% of gross income has to come from active conduct within the zone, which was very prohibitive.
Yeah. Rachel's so right. Mike Novogradic did a good job at pushing hard on what we referred to as the regionality problem. It doesn't really happen big time in clean energy because everything is right there on site and there's no question whether they comply or not. But when you start looking at venture investing, it became a problem for us. So we did not start advocating for venture investing in clean tech companies through this mechanism until after the April 17th regs. But once those clarifications came, Rachel has described it perfectly. The regionality issue really has been resolved.
Yeah.
Resolved even for the technology companies?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I apologize. I have to drop to catch a flight, but if folks need to reach me, I'm at rachel@eig.org. Thank you all so much for being interested in opportunity zones, and for Rick and John for inviting me to be on the webinar today.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rachel.
Bye, guys.
Any other last questions for John?
Well, we got 7 more minutes, Rick.
I know. You and I can just talk.
I'm here to help, so whatever we got.
I have one. Is there other entities or?
Just come up here.
Is there other things besides solar panel and windmills that you know of that anybody's pursuing? Because I hear you talk about a lot of windmills and solar panels. Is there other things that other people are trying to do?
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, any clean energy project, hydro, biomass, waste to energy. Well, waste to energy is a little marginal for us, but if it's an equity position in a project that feels like clean energy, we like it. I mean, for example, we're working with a clean tech. It's a venture investment at first, but it's a company that's doing a wastewater treatment technology that will reduce the amount of energy by 50% as compared to the state of the art. So that's an example where energy savings is important. So that's a venture investment, but then they have a whole project pipeline, which they're going to locate those projects in opportunity zones, and we're going to help them create QOFs for each one of those project investments. So that's a wastewater treatment thing, but it directly ties into avoiding carbon energy. So we love that.
Okay. Yep. And that is for John specifically with New Energy Nexus. So obviously there's non-clean tech stuff going on out there. We just had a mutual friend that has med tech companies that just set up an opportunity zone fund in the city of Akron. So that's the same rules. Yep, it's exact same stuff. But Jon is solely focused on clean tech. So
are there any application limitations? Can it be anything? If you invest in an opportunity zone,
it could be real estate. Any
equity. Any
equity, yes. Any equity, to be clear. Yep.
As a for-profit business,
yep.
Can we benefit from being in an opportunity zone?
As a for-profit business, can you benefit from being in an opportunity zone?
Of course.
Yeah. Jon goes with of course, and Lauren's got a good answer here.
It's not designed to recapitalize existing investments. It's really designed to incent new investments through equity. So there are ways that you can structure it to do new projects, although it's somewhat more cumbersome to structure them because there are requirements about where you physically hold the assets of the company. So for a company with multiple locations, it would be challenging. You'd have to structure it appropriately so that you had a holding company for that particular project. So potentially, yes.
Well, no, I would actually put more clarification on that. I would say that back to Rachel's point about regionality, if you clearly qualify from a regionality perspective, then all you need to do is offer a new share class to comply. So, if you say, hey, we're ready to expand our business and you want to take some capital to expand that business and you want to use equity because for whatever reason you can't get debt, well, then you can offer a new series share class and use this money that gives you a lot more flexibility as a CEO or as a manager of that business. The money wants to be involved in productive businesses that will have higher value outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that hard to structure. I disagree with Rachel there. This is not difficult.
That is what I've heard from EIG as well.
So who can provide some of that kind of counsel or guidance? Is that something that you guys do, or?
You want a CPA.
Yeah. She said, who would provide that guidance specifically? Is that something that Jon does, and Lauren and I respond to CPA and law firm?
What's the business? What do you do?
We make steel pipe. You mentioned earlier about the steel factory that's that's down. Well, we actually operate a steel making facility.
That's currently not operating.
It is operating.
They're currently operating and making steel.
I see. Okay. Interesting. Wait, so you're in an opportunity zone, and Rachel was just referring to you. I thought it was.
No.
So it's operating.
No, two different
things.
Locations, different. This is an existing company. That is a site of a former company. Those are totally different.
I believe we're in an opportunity zone.
You are.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a different one in Warren that they were talking about earlier that shut down.
Okay.
In a different city.
Okay.
So I'm in a city that also has an opportunity zone where we're located, and we are fully functioning manufacturing company.
For context, this is not a single location. They have other locations across the United States and globally. So when I talk about structuring,
we have one
location
in Youngstown. It's a limited partnership, independent from that perspective.
So is the management of that limited partnership at that location?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, I understand that it might be a subsidiary of another company. Is the management of the global group at that facility?
No.
Then I have to agree with Rachel that you should get some advice on that.
Are you Rachel?
I'm not. She's Lauren. I think.
Yes. This is Lauren, by the way, from the chamber.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lauren.
I might have said Rachel once after he did too. Yeah, you're Rachel now. It's fine.
Lauren, I'm sorry, Lauren.
Yep. All right. Well, one more question.
John, would you be willing to share the modeling you did for that 1 megawatt project in Delaware with us, so we understand kind of what the scale is, what you guys are looking for, and what's going to be bankable?
Yeah, look, I mean, the slides, Rick, you're going to circulate those slides, right?
Absolutely.
The slides, is that in an Excel format, or it's a pretty simple spreadsheet?
Oh my gosh. It's a 15% basis adjustment, and it's the value of 7 years of not paying your tax. That's it. It's really math. It's not that difficult.
Yeah. Do you have your contact info anywhere as well?
Yeah, Rick has it. You just get it from Rick.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Thanks.
I'll circulate everybody's contact info in the slides. Sumi?
Yeah, from like a policy standpoint with our local.
You might want to come up if you're going to ask a long question.
John, I just want to ask from a local level, with talking to our local elected officials, what have been drivers that have made it successful for local cities and counties to incentivize, like you talked about, at the local levels, or what are some models that we could kind of bring to them?
Take that hit sheet. Rick, go back in the slide deck to what a city, a county, or a state can do. Go back there, and I'll walk through it again with you, because it's really important. Think about things that are really good, like charging infrastructure, which will help your fleet accelerate the transition to full clean energy electrification. Their role, right? So here you go. Prioritize interconnects and penalize the offending party when they don't interconnect quickly. That's something that your local politicians have. Usually they're assigning the public utility commissioners. They're usually assigning the energy commission people. They're actively involved in this conversation. So they can put pressure on those bodies that can lever penalties. The permitting they control through the EPA or through the building and the building associations, or through whatever it might be. Permitting can be streamlined for clean energy stuff. Being concessionary. Lauren just spoke about all these properties that are available. Well, the municipal probably owns some land that they could say, yeah, we'd like to do solar out there, or we'd like to put a wind farm there, or and they give you a 100-year lease for $1 or something. You know, if they want it, they have to pay too.
All right, unless there's time for one last question, if anybody has it, and then I think we'll go offline. Anybody have any really good questions?
I was going to ask, so as a startup owner, if I had an interested investor, would I be able to tell them, hey, I'm in an opportunity zone, or should I be looking for someone who has an opportunity fund and already doing this? Because I heard earlier that it doesn't make sense for one sort of a thing. Is this something I can use to sell investments in my clean tech startup company? Or am I coming this from below?
Yes, I think that you should make your capital sources aware that you're a qualified opportunity zone business, and they can either use pre or post-tax money to make that investment in your business. And because it only costs $3,000 to create a qualified opportunity zone fund, if the investor is considering anything above $30,000 in one single investment in your company, then they certainly should consider using this tool.
Absolutely, and that's also one of the reasons that T-Bike is so involved in this conversation. Is our energy business incubator is smack dab in the middle of an opportunity zone. So our startup companies that have the majority of their operations here automatically qualify in our qualified opportunity zone businesses. That's why putting this group together is so important for the community, investors, and our companies to understand that this is a very real thing, and we're very excited to be a part of that.
Hey, Rick, that's a very good point. Lacey, which is the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator. It's the largest incubator in the United States.
Matt Peterson actually spoke at our grand opening of our lab here last year.
Sorry, who did it? Was it Matt?
Yeah, Matt did.
Fantastic. Okay. So they are also located in an opportunity zone. And like you, Rick, they're thinking, well, all of our companies should be using this tool. And so we're working with them on educating the what they call, their portfolio. And we're educating our portfolio of 48 companies. And everyone should be educating their communities. That's part of our work, awareness, education, and then we facilitate qualified opportunity zone funds.
Last question.
Yeah, you mentioned it costs $3,000 to start up the fund. Is that an estimate of what legal fees might be, or is that for a government fee for filing, et cetera? Is that a fixed amount, or is that just a general?
No, that's a really good question, and one of my favorite things is why I introduced everybody to Jon.
That's a fixed service fee, and then what?
I didn't say anything. I just said that's why I wanted you on this call, because you have really good answers to this.
Yeah, it's a fixed service fee, and all state fees, which usually come up to about I think it's $280 or something. All those fees are passed through, so it ends up being a net cost of like $3,800 for the first year, and then because there's a biannual compliance check on the fund, meaning every June 30th and every December 31st, the fund has to report to Federal Treasury. We do that for the QOF for $750 per year.
So that's for this service. So they will handle basically what they said, the 2 contracts, the reporting.
Yeah, well, it ends up being 3 contracts, but yes.
3, yes. Sorry.
At least 10 times less than anything else we've seen.
Yes. So if you go to any local attorneys or anything like that, it will be at least 10 to 15,000.
So Rick, we've seen people already spend hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to sort out this stuff.
Yep. So that's the service, and it's low cost, and that's why we wanted to be able to provide that. Well, we want Jon to provide it. I don't want to do anything.
Right. Hey, Rick, I want to thank you. I've got to jump.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody that's here today. And thank you, everybody that's online. You're over there on that camera, probably. And we're just very excited to be moving forward and to start making investments into Warren, Ohio. So thank you, Jon, for being on.
Take care. Bye, Lauren.
So is this presentation available online to review? Like not the slides, but the talks that they gave and everything.
I think I hit record.
There's a website we can go to.
Yeah, we'll put it up on our
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Give us a day.
We're still recording too, so I'm going to try to figure out how to stop that. And meeting.